You've probably heard of the South China Sea disputes, a major flashpoint involving China, the Philippines, Vietnam, and others. But the South China Sea isn't the only maritime dispute in Asia. Today, we're going to talk about 4 often overlooked maritime flashpoints in South and Southeast Asia, and how they're reshaping the geopolitical landscape today. In East Asia, various states are mostly fighting over who owns particular rocks in order to claim control of the surrounding ocean. Things are different in South and Southeast Asia. Besides the South China Sea, there are various waterways under contention, from open ocean to marshlands and rivers. Even settled maritime borders are becoming problems thanks to changing political circumstances on the water and on land. But which of these maritime flashpoints are most likely to lead to an actual conflict? Let's dive in. Have you ever heard of Kachativu? The India-Sri Lanka maritime dispute we're talking about today is not really over a contentious border, but it could be. In March 2025, Tamil Nadu's assembly passed a resolution to reclaim Kachativu Island from Sri Lanka. The state assembly has done this before too, in 1991, in 2013, and in 2014. The island sits in the Palk Strait, the narrow and relatively shallow waterway separating the southeastern coast of India, the state of Tamil Nadu, from the northern coast of Sri Lanka. Kachativu is tiny, barely 285 acres and less than a mile long. A Roman Catholic shrine dedicated in 1905 is the only significant structure on the island, which is mostly used by fishermen to rest and dry their nets. Ownership of Kachativu was disputed during British colonial rule between the Raja of Ramnad and the Diocese of Jaffna. The empire eventually sorted the island into Ceylon. But after independence in 1947, India and Ceylon, which we now call Sri Lanka, argued once again over the island's ownership. In 1974, Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi effectively recognized Kachativu as Sri Lankan territory when she signed an agreement that drew a boundary line between the two countries. The 288-kilometer International Maritime Boundary Line, or IMBL, became the border between India and Sri Lanka, and Kachativu was on Sri Lanka's side of the line. The 1974 agreement provided Indians traditional rights to access the island. Fishermen could continue to dry their nets there, and pilgrims could visit St. Anthony's Shrine. 2 years later, a second maritime agreement laid out each side's exclusive economic zones, or EEZs. That deal explicitly barred Indians from fishing in Sri Lankan waters, including around Kachativu. The same was true in reverse. Sri Lankan fishermen had to respect India's EEZ. That's just how borders work. So why then does the Palk Strait simmer with tension on occasion? Why did Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his BJP allege in 2024 that earlier Indian administrations had erroneously gifted the island to Sri Lanka and that India should seek its return? The answers lie in the tangled net of fishing rights and domestic politics. Indians in Tamil Nadu aren't mad about the island itself, but the rights to fish in and around the IMBL. And the BJP knows a populist thread to pull when it sees it. Relations between Indian and Sri Lankan fishermen were cordial in the past, but Sri Lanka's civil war, which erupted in 1983, upset the balance. With the separatist Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, the LTTE, ferrying wounded fighters and weapons via the Palk Strait, the Sri Lankan Navy banned fishing on the Sri Lankan side of the IMBL. The war ended in 2009, and Sri Lankan fishermen were again free to ply the strait. But when they returned to the waters off the northern coast of the country, Sri Lanka's Tamil fishermen found themselves up against Indian rivals. Indian companies had moved into the strait with massive mechanized trawlers that scoured down to the seabed, decimating the marine ecosystem and destroying not just the nets, but the livelihoods of local Sri Lankan fishermen. The Tamil Nadu Marine Fisheries Regulation Act of 1983 limited fishing and bottom trawling within 3 nautical miles of the Indian coast and promoted deep-sea fishing, but the law had not been tightly enforced. As a result, fish stocks were depleted on the Indian side of the IMBL, and fishermen and companies alike ranged further and further out, including into Sri Lankan waters. In 2017, Sri Lanka became the first country in Asia to completely ban bottom trawling, and it has enforced that ban. But Indian fishing companies persist with the practice, especially outside of Indian waters. That has led to clashes. In early August 2024, 4 Indian fishermen aboard a trawler in the Palk Strait attempted to evade an approaching Sri Lankan Navy patrol. The Indian boat capsized. It was conducting what Sri Lankan authorities and media later described as aggressive maneuvers in an attempt to escape. 2 of the Indian fishermen were rescued from the water by the Sri Lankan Navy, but 1 man died and the 4th disappeared into the sea. A week later, the Sri Lankan Navy arrested 33 Indian fishermen and seized 4 boats. Trawler companies in Tamil Nadu are politically well connected and have long resisted government plans for shifting back to traditional fishing. Political parties are also keen to avoid angering local fishermen. The BJP in particular has an interest in portraying the DMK as insensitive to the concerns of the region's fishermen. The DMK is at present the main opposition in the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly, but it was in government in 1974 when the maritime boundary was set down. In April 2024, Modi tweeted a broadside against the DMK, directly referencing the Kachativu issue. Rhetoric aside, DMK has done nothing to safeguard Tamil Nadu's interests. Despite the sound and fury, India and Sri Lanka aren't about to go to war over Kachativu, but it is a convenient flashpoint on which to opportunistically focus domestic political grandstanding. Kachativu also reflects a hard truth. Even a settled border can once again become a cause of contention. That's also true of our next flashpoint, but this one has the added risk of a real conflict already raging in the area. Bangladesh and Myanmar settled their land border back in 1966, when Bangladesh was still East Pakistan. The 271-kilometer boundary runs from the India-Bangladesh-Myanmar tri-junction in the north to the Bay of Bengal in the south, with the Naf River forming the final stretch of the border. It took another 46 years to establish the complete maritime border between the two states. From 1974 to 1986, the two sides held 8 rounds of bilateral negotiations to delimit their territorial waters, EEZs, and continental shelf boundaries. They charted a line parallel to the coast of Myanmar's Rakhine State, and equidistant between that coast and Bangladesh's St. Martin's Island. But the dispute re-emerged in the early 2000s when hydrocarbon gas reserves were discovered in the Bay of Bengal. Things came to a head with a naval standoff in November 2008. Myanmar had allowed Daewoo, a South Korean company, to explore the seabed in an area 50 nautical miles southwest of St. Martin's Island, squarely in contested waters. Bangladesh protested that any exploration activity had to wait for the completion of a final and clear delimitation of the maritime boundary. The Bangladesh Navy deployed 3 warships to the area, and Myanmar deployed at least 2 naval vessels. Within a week, Myanmar's vessels and the South Korean company withdrew. About a year after the naval standoff, in October 2009, Bangladesh launched a legal case to find a final resolution under the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Myanmar agreed to take the case to the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, or ITLOS, a permanent judicial body established by the Law of the Sea. Both Bangladesh and Myanmar had realized that continued uncertainty was worse than any judgment the tribunal could render. The two sides submitted their claims, and ITLOS deliberated for almost 3 years. The tribunal delivered its verdict on March 14, 2012. It was the body's first ever maritime delimitation judgment. Although the tribunal ruled near unanimously in Bangladesh's favor, Myanmar welcomed the settlement, branding the resolution as a win-win and an open door for both sides to proceed confidently with offshore energy exploration. But within a few years, politics on land derailed those hopes. The persecution of Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar dates back to the 1970s, but in 2017 it reached the level of outright genocide. The Myanmar military launched a massive operation in Rakhine State, which triggered the largest exodus in Asia since the Vietnam War. More than 750,000 Rohingya people, half of them children according to the UN Refugee Agency, fled across the border to seek safety in Bangladesh. Many of them crossed the Naf River or escaped Myanmar via boats to try their luck in the Bay of Bengal. Crossing the border, whether by land or by sea, was now a matter of life or death for hundreds of thousands of people. A decade on, the Rohingya are still living in refugee camps in Bangladesh. Only now, Myanmar is embroiled in a full-on civil war. Although the border itself is not a subject of conflict at the state level, the border is a site of conflict, especially on the Myanmar side. The Arakan Army, arguably the most powerful ethnic armed organization in Myanmar, controls vast swaths of Rakhine State, including border posts along the Naf River. Human trafficking, as well as drugs and arms smuggling, have escalated. The fighting between Myanmar's military and the Arakan Army resulted in Bangladesh's St. Martin's Island being cut off from the mainland on several occasions in 2024 and 2025. The border is no longer a matter for 2 governments, but 3 stakeholders: the governments in Bangladesh and Myanmar and the Arakan Army. And since Bangladesh's government has been reluctant to talk to an ethnic armed group, the Arakan Army has taken matters into its own hands. The militia has been encroaching on Bangladesh's maritime territory, going so far as to kidnap Bangladeshi fishermen in both the Bay of Bengal and the Naf River and hold them for ransom. According to the Border Guard Bangladesh, in 2025 alone, the Arakan Army abducted over 350 Bangladeshi citizens, most of them from waters along the border area. Myanmar's government may consider the border a settled matter, but the Iraqi army apparently feels differently. Still, the likelihood of Bangladesh and Myanmar, or Bangladesh and the Iraqi army for that matter, getting into a direct conflict over either their land or maritime border is almost zero. Sporadic violence is likely, but not direct attacks with an eye towards seizing territory. That's not the case with our next maritime dispute, which features two of the Asian states most likely to go to war with each other, because they already have, most recently in May 2025. I'm talking about India and Pakistan. You have surely heard about the Kashmir dispute, which has repeatedly brought nuclear-armed India and Pakistan to blows. But have you heard about Sur Creek? Sur Creek is a 96-kilometer tidal estuary in the uninhabited marshlands of the Indus River Delta on the border between India and Pakistan. It flows into the Arabian Sea and divides India's Gujarat from Pakistan's Sindh. Filled with crocodiles, vipers, and scorpions, the brackish water of the creek floods its banks during the monsoon season, becoming a dangerous but navigable waterway. Sur Creek has been a point of contention for more than 150 years. Back in 1875, the two princely states of Sindh and Kutch argued over where their border lay in the shifting marshes west of the Great Rann of Kutch, a salt marsh in the Thar Desert. The British eventually brokered an agreement in 1914 between the two, known as the Bombay Government Resolution, on the Kutch-Sindh boundary. But the Bombay Resolution didn't resolve the dispute, it just planted the seeds of future conflict. Following the partition of the subcontinent in 1947, Sindh became part of Pakistan, and Kutch remained with India. Although Pakistan called for the delimitation of the Sindh-Kutch border in 1948, the dispute lay dormant for nearly 20 years. And then, in 1965, Sur Creek nearly transformed from a localized colonial artifact into a geopolitical flashpoint. Most people have forgotten all about it, because later that same year, the Second India-Pakistan War kicked off in Kashmir, and Sur Creek got pushed off the headlines. But months before the Kashmir War, in April 1965, Pakistan launched Operation Desert Hawk down in Sur Creek. Pakistan moved troops across the creek and into the Rann of Kutch, following a claim to the area made in January 1965. Pakistan deployed an infantry division and 2 armed regiments equipped with American-made Patton tanks and field guns. India resisted, but given the terrain, inferior equipment, and poor logistics, Indian troops were forced to retreat. The British stepped in to mediate a ceasefire in late April, and both sides agreed to settle the dispute through arbitration arranged via the International Court of Justice. 3 years later, the Indo-Pakistan Western Boundary Case Tribunal granted New Delhi 90% of its requests and ceded only small sections of territory to Pakistan. But the tribunal expressly omitted Sur Creek and the maritime boundary from consideration, focusing on the Rann of Kutch and the land border, and thus the dispute over the estuary continued to fester. Pakistan claims the entirety of the creek, citing language from the 1914 Bombay Resolution. That resolution had described the creek's border as from the mouth of Sur Creek to the top of Sur Creek and from the top of Sur Creek eastward. Pakistan interpreted this as saying the boundary lay east of the creek, meaning the creek belonged to Pakistan in its entirety. India advanced what's known as the Thalweg Doctrine, under which an international border along a navigable river is located at the center of the main channel. Of course, the Thalweg Doctrine applies specifically to navigable waterways, and Pakistan disputes that the estuary counts as navigable. Why does it even matter exactly where this border is drawn? Well, the core reason is a little further offshore. Sur Creek opens into the Arabian Sea, and where the border runs through the creek impacts the delimitation of Pakistan and India's EEZs and continental shelves. Even a 2 to 3 kilometer shift to the east or west of the boundary at the mouth of the creek will significantly alter the starting point of the EEZ line. When projected 200 nautical miles into the Arabian Sea, that can translate into thousands of square kilometers of maritime territory. These waters are rich in fish and other resources, with both sides hopeful that oil and gas could be found in the continental shelves. So the economic stakes are high. India and Pakistan have engaged in several rounds of negotiations to resolve the Sur Creek dispute. Talks between 1989 and 1998 saw significant technical progress, including an agreement on survey methods and historical documentation. But neither side really budged from their positions, and repeated incidents derailed progress. In 1999, just a month after the Kargil War, the Indian Air Force shot down a Pakistan Navy reconnaissance plane carrying 16 naval officers for an alleged violation of Indian airspace over the Rann of Kutch. Negotiations between 2004 and 2007 led to the two countries conducting joint hydrographic surveys in the Sur Creek area. The surveys mapped the creek's contours and identified fixed reference points that could serve as a basis for future demarcation. But that hasn't come to pass. The 2008 Mumbai attacks set India and Pakistan back once more. It also reinforced the strategic importance of the maritime space. The terrorists set sail from Karachi and hijacked an Indian fishing boat in the Arabian Sea in order to attack the Indian city of Mumbai. In 2019, Pakistan began a significant military buildup around Sur Creek, raising new creek battalions, deploying coastal defense boats, and upgrading air defenses. India responded in kind. And this is an issue India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi knows intimately. After all, from 2001 to 2014, he was Gujarat's chief minister. In 2012, he penned a letter to then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh demanding that the Indian government immediately halt dialogue with Pakistan over the creek. At no cost should Sur Creek be given to Pakistan, as it will be a sellout of Indian interest and it is a major threat to the safety and security of the people of Gujarat, Modi warned. The Singh administration called the letter unsubstantiated and mischievous. The government denied that it was even talking about Sur Creek with Pakistan. Modi went on to lead his BJP to electoral victory in 2014, unseating Singh's Indian National Congress. Modi hasn't left the prime ministership since, and Sur Creek remains on the mind of Indian officials. In October 2025, while delivering a speech at a military base in Gujarat, Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, no relation to former Prime Minister Singh, warned Pakistan against launching any aggression in the Sur Creek area. It would, he said, lead to an Indian response so strong it would change both history and geography. In 2025, Pakistan must remember that the road to Karachi also passes through the creek, he said. The main point of tension along the India-Pakistan border remains far to the north of Sur Creek, in Kashmir. Nevertheless, among South and Southeast Asia's lesser-watched maritime disputes, the argument over Sur Creek has high explosive potential. But there's one other lesser-discussed maritime dispute that we think is even more dangerous. And here it is. In the summer of 2025, a long-simmering border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia escalated into an armed conflict. We'll cover that in detail in a later episode, looking at Asia's overlooked land disputes. But Cambodia and Thailand share an extensive and also disputed maritime boundary, and the situation has recently worsened. In May 2026, Thailand unilaterally withdrew from a 2001 Memorandum of Understanding known as MOU 44. That agreement had outlined a framework and the motivation for the two countries to work through their maritime dispute. Since the 1970s, Cambodia and Thailand have disputed a 26,000-kilometer area in the Gulf of Thailand, known as the Overlapping Claims Area, or OCA. The OCA is believed to hold rich deposits of oil and gas worth billions, in addition to lucrative fish stocks. MOU 44 didn't settle the dispute, but it made clear that it was in the best interest of the two countries to agree upon an early, mutually acceptable basis for exploration of the hydrocarbon resources of the OCA as soon as possible. It also pledged both sides to agree upon a mutually acceptable delimitation of the territorial sea, continental shelf, and exclusive economic zone within the OCA. The problem, of course, is that 25 years went by with hardly any progress. As we've seen elsewhere in Asia, maritime disputes usually come with a heavy dose of nationalism. In Thailand, nationalists nurture resentment over what they portray as colonial-era thefts of Thai territory. Add in Thailand's chronic political instability, and you have a recipe for dangerous escalation. In October 2024, the government of then-Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra and Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet made efforts to resume negotiations on the OCA. But Thai nationalists seized on the effort to make erroneous claims that Thailand could lose the island of Koh Kood, and that was enough to kill the fledgling effort to settle the maritime boundary. The Koh Kood dispute is an offshoot of the larger Cambodia-Thailand border disagreement, which dates back to a 1907 treaty between France, Cambodia's colonial ruler at the time, and Siam, what we now call Thailand. The Franco-Siamese Treaty of 1907 redefined the borders on land, but it did not explicitly delineate the offshore maritime boundary, except for setting a landward starting point. The treaty stated that the maritime border begins at a point opposite the highest peak on the island of Koh Kood. but Cambodia and Thailand have offered very different interpretations of where the line runs from there. Cambodia formalized its claim in a 1972 decree, drawing a line that shaves off the southern portion of the island, thus claiming part of it. Thailand's claim angles further to the south and includes the whole of the island, which it retains administrative control of to this day. Ironically, the brief effort to settle the maritime dispute in late 2024 set off a conflict on land. The tensions that led to the outbreak of fighting along the land border in 2025 began not long after Paetong Tarn Shinawat and Hun Manet tried to resume negotiations on the OCA. As on previous occasions, the Thai government came under immediate fire from royalist conservatives and backed off. The ultra-royalists were already suspicious of Paetong Tarn's father, former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawat. Critics fixated on Thaksin's friendship with Cambodia's former Prime Minister Hun Sen, suggesting Thaksin's daughter might sell out Thai interests in a mutually beneficial backroom deal. This naturally prompted reactions from Cambodian nationalists, including exiled opposition figures who reasserted their own dormant claims to Kokud and pressured the Cambodian government to defend those claims. In the end, both governments hardened their stances. The talks on the OCA were called off. Soon afterward, tensions began over disputed parts of the land border, with deadly results. Following Thailand's withdrawal from MOU 44, in early June 2026, Cambodia's government launched a compulsory conciliation process under the UN Law of the Sea. Thailand has agreed to the process, and conciliation is set to begin later this year. But the recommendations of the Conciliation Committee are not legally binding, and there is no guarantee that they will be accepted in either or both capitals, especially if tensions persist on land. These are just a few of the many overlooked flashpoints in Asia. In fact, we're doing a whole series on Asia's hidden but simmering maritime and territorial disputes. Check out last week's video on East Asia's little-known maritime disputes and come back next week for a video on the disputed land borders of Southeast Asia.